Hello, I'm your host Jim McLean. Welcome back to another episode of the BANTERFLIX Movie Review Show. Let's see what we'll be talking about tonight. We'll be reviewing Project Hail Mary as it blasts into cinemas. We'll be speaking with the cast and crew of No Ordinary Heist as it arrives in cinemas this week. And our pick of the streams is the latest Louis Theroux documentary on Netflix, Inside the Manosphere. So that's what we've lined up for you this week. Joining me in the studio here in Belfast is the lovely Jess Blair.
How you doing?
And Joe McElroy.
How you doing?
Good to see you again, Joe. Fresh-faced from Hollywood with one Earl. Some point, if there's anyone watching, any investors, even like the crooked Bond villains, if they want to invest for us to go and send you to the proper Hollywood, it's going to happen. But how did you find your trip to Hollywood, County Town?
Nice.
You clearly got home safe and well.
Yes, I did eventually, but that bus was another about hour or two away. So thanks very much for that, Jim.
You did a fantastic job summarising the Oscars, so fab job, well done. Without any further ado, let's move on and talk about some movie news.
I can't believe our first hit MIT! MJ, come on, pretend like you're not the happiest you've ever been in your entire life.
I can't.
I knew it!
Hi, my name is Peter Parker. You don't remember me, but we used to know each other. Something bad was going to happen, and the only way to stop it was to make everyone forget about me. Because I'm not just Peter Parker. I'm Spider-Man.
The hell, Frank? You just hit me with a van!
Quit your whimpering. Suit yourself. Mother.
Go home!
Okay, so we've had a glut of trailers in the past week. You know, June 3, we've had the full-length trailer for Moana. We've got a bit more look at the unnecessary on-CGI'd rock from that film. But more importantly, I guess, well, according to TikTok, well, my algorithm on TikTok, it seems to be everybody's getting excited or not excited about Spider-Man Brand New Day. Jess, you excited about this? Has this caught your attention? Are you ready for a fourth outing? Well, technically fourth solo outing for our favourite neighbourhood wall crawler.
I am intrigued. I am intrigued by it. I am looking forward to it. But then again, it's Spider-Man, it's Marvel. I'm willing to give anything a go from them. But it does look quite good. It's a unique take. I think it has a lot of potential.
But you don't sound like you are ready to kind of bust down the cinema doors of your local multiplex and say, give me my ticket, please, for Spider-Man Brand New Day.
Unfortunately, Marvel has stung a lot in the last couple of outings. I feel a little superheroed out. I want something to wow me. I don't feel it yet.
Joe, what about you? Intriguing for this next outing for Tom Holland? There's a hint, I think, in this trailer of things that we are have been removed, I should say, for the trailer to, I guess, give us that big screen moment, that wow factor. But I've been here before. Andrew Garfield told us for like 2 years he wasn't going to be in the next Spider-Man movie. So I don't know, but I know I'm going to go see it. So are you excited?
I was actually before the trailer. I've seen like a lot of videos like behind the scenes, like all this great live action stunt work taking place, and I was like, oh, actually, it looks like Marvel's really getting into doing proper like live action stunts more so than they have in the past, which has been a bit too CGI heavy and weightless. And then I watched the trailer and went, oh no, they've gone back to their old habits, which is a bit of a shame. And then the look of it as well, it has like the color grading of a puddle outside. I think Tom Holland's a very good Spider-Man. I have enjoyed, out of the previous films that I have seen, he's been the best part of them. The one thing I'm looking forward to is the dynamic between him and the Punisher, because I do like John Bernthal as the Punisher. So That's maybe the thing that might get me, twist my arm and get me into the cinema, but I'll just have to wait and see. Maybe the next trailer might sell it for me.
Look, Spider-Man, Tom, Marvel, Kevin Feige, if you're watching, they're going to get my money. I'm going to go see it, but I will be honest, I don't have that same enthusiasm about this film as I did. But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe I'll enjoy it even more. But we're going to have to wait till July. I think on that note, that's a film that is yet to be released on the big screen. Let's move on and talk about something that's out now.
His eating habits are exotic.
Grace looks disgust when eat.
How do you look when you eat?
It look beautiful.
Show me. Oh my God. Oh my God.
He has incredible hearing. He can see through walls. Personal space is at a premium.
Who is Grace talking to? Question.
There's no way you can hear me right now.
Can hear. Who are you talking to?
You can hear this.
Yes, Grace say you can hear this.
What about this?
Yes.
Oh my God. Look at this. Look how far away he is.
That is where he is.
Hello, Grace.
He's right here.
Hello, Grace friend.
Okay.
Jess, we haven't had you on the show for a while, but when I saw the blurb about the film, because this is one of the little 2026 treats for Jim, because I've stayed away from the trailer, I haven't read the book, but I do have a little bit of a man crush on Ryan Gosling, and that was enough to sell me on this film. Also, we have Phil Lord, Christopher Miller, who I love. We're talking about Spider-Man a minute ago. They've done Spider-Verse, and this is their first live-action feature, I think, since possibly the 22 Jump Street, the sequel. I could be wrong. I'm always wrong. Someone will message in. But when I saw the blurb and I finally gave in and looked at the trailer, I thought, I know someone who might just like this film. And I thought of your lovely self, send you a little voice note, and you graciously then responded and said, yes, happily come on, and also I have things to say about Project Hail Mary. So I'm guessing you were excited about this. You've read the book. I've already kind of said that, so take it away, Jess, Blair. What do you think of this film?
Without being too spoilerific, amaze. It has to be said. As you mentioned, I read the book. When I seen this was becoming a film, I got so stupidly excited, especially knowing Ryan Gosling was going to be in this, because he had that look, how I imagined in my head Ryland to be. And that just immediately set off for me, like, this is going to be a very interesting take on this book, I believe. Going into the film, I did try and curb enthusiasm, and we do have, unfortunately, a bit of a string of probably historical films we can choose where adaptations from book or video game have not went well, talking about Assassin's Creed. And it does sting you a little bit when you're excited about something and you go in and see, and I was blown away, absolutely blown away. Yes, there was changes from the book. I could understand the changes that were made. I also had in my head that Andy Weir, the genius who wrote Project Hail Mary and also The Martian, was very heavily involved in the development of this film. So if he can stand by these changes, so can I. I can't exactly question the man. The changes, without going into any kind of spoiler detail, don't take away from the film or from the book, in terms of how the kind of story unfolds, the emotions. There's a slight change, but I really don't think if you've read the book, you're going to be too disappointed. Yes, there's going to be moments you wish you'd seen. There's some hilarious moments in the book I'm surprised didn't make it to the film. But the film more than makes up with it with its own sort of, jokes and jabs. And the changes throughout it, I think, are tastefully done as well. They're not just sort of done for cinematic effect. They actually do help translate the book very, very well to the screen.
Okay, because I know examples that come to mind, just as I'm thinking right now, is the likes of Ready Player One. I know there was changes there that a lot of people did not like. Some of that is down to copyright, another is directive choice. You mentioned this is from Andy Weir, of course, the author behind The Martian, which was a huge success. You know, we had Matt Damon, we had Ridley Scott. This time round, though, we have Phil Lord and Christopher Miller. An intriguing choice. I think, for me, without giving the game away about how I feel about this film, it's a real step up from them as filmmakers. As much as I love them in their previous work, we look at the Lego movie that took me by surprise, 21 Jump Street, I think even of more recently the Spider-Verse films that just completely grabbed my attention and made me wish that as a 43-year-old I was 16 watching these films in the cinema for the first time. So, Joe, I've kind of given the game away. I really like this film. I have just come from the screening to see that. I'm still processing it. I had to kind of take a little while to compose myself. It was a very dusty screening. Quite a few times I find myself kind of going, I'm, a beautiful one single tear. I'm not a beautiful crier like Ryan Gosling. I don't have that skill. Maybe one time, eventually, I will learn that trait. But Joe, I digress. Were you, like Jess, a fan of the book that this was based on? Had you read this, and did you come into this, like me, knowing very little?
I was a bit like yourself, knowing very little, and I think I was in a similar cinema. It was very dusty, when I went to see it. The dust really hit me about an hour in and never stopped. But I knew very little going in, but I really enjoyed this film because I am a big fan of science fiction, and the concept alone, when you read the sort of basic synopsis of it, you're like, okay, you sold me in that. Ryan Gosling in space with a wee friend from beyond the stars, trying to save both of their planets from dying and take it from there, and it was brilliant. The thing about it that I really, really liked was the relationship between Ryland and Rocky. That's the thing that really pushed the film forward, because up to that point I was on the fence. I was going, I don't know how this is going to sustain itself for 2.5 hours. But yeah, once that comes into play, it really comes to life for me, because the film is told with a disjointed narrative, and that's my main gripe with the film. I don't think that works all the time. I think it sort of stunts a lot of the emotional moments. Like, you could be having something, a certain emotional high, and then all of a sudden you're like, and now we have a bit of a flashback. It makes sense in the context of the story why they have flashbacks, but it sort of didn't really work for me watching it going in cold, not knowing much about the story itself. But other than that, in terms of a piece of sci-fi spectacle alone, it's absolutely beautiful to look at. And at times it just made me feel like this is a nice blend of Spielberg and Kubrick. At the same time, a lot of it was 2001, a lot of Spielberg was in there as well. Just in that sort of Amblin heart, if that makes sense. So those two elements combined, and that's what Lord and Miller did really well, I think, within the film. And then obviously Ryan Gosling in the leading role, and who better to sort of like guide you for the majority of the film on their own than someone like Ryan Gosling. As
someone who in my other kind of day job reads the news and has to talk about what's going on, various in the Middle East, etc. A film like this is just a nice little way to spend 2 hours, 40 minutes, and be upbeat, going back to that kind of classic, like the silent running. There's nods to me like Enemy Mine, even little bits, elements of The Odd Couple in there. Just a film to sit down. It won't be for everyone, I get that. I know it won't be for everyone. I think there will be some people who might think there's a bit of Return of the King-itis here, where it kind of, okay, everything has been wrapped up, we know how this is going to end, okay, we have another ending, but I didn't have that issue at all. And so yeah, I think largely positive there for Project Hail Mary, and it has done really well at the box office, both in the US and here. I know it's top as we record this week. Another film that is hitting cinemas is No Ordinary Heist, which is loosely inspired by the Northern Bank robbery, which depressingly I can remember back in 2004. And last week I got the chance to head down for the Irish premiere at the Odeon to speak with some of the cast and crew.
You're in a position of responsibility. Anyone could distract you and snatch those keys. God, no. This will be a very swift operation.
No Ordinary Heist was one of those events that, or it's inspired by the 2004 bank robbery, the Northern Bank robbery, and everything that was involved was a big deal. But as I say, I boiled it down to something very small, which was the two guys at the centre of it, and it's very much an inspired by, and we've fictionalised, a lot of it as well.
You will evade security, fill 3 cages with cash, and bring them to us. And here's the clever bit. Not one of my men will set foot inside the bank. Your job is to keep each other's loved ones alive.
I play Captain Richard Murray, who in this story is the bank manager of the Northern Bank. And his wife is kidnapped by the bank robbers. And Aina's character's mum is kidnapped. He plays Barry, and Barry's mum is kidnapped. Richard and Barry, the bank manager and the security guard, have a difficult history, a difficult past that they have to overcome. But they have to rob the bank. They have to rob the bank for the bank managers, for the bank robbers, in order to save their wife and their mother.
The context of the film is so clear. This is something that happened post Good Friday Agreement, and as you say, the film doesn't deal with that directly. Its focus is the story of these two men and their families. So in that way, it's not sort of front and center as a talking point in the film. But of course, by virtue of it being set in the city and when it is set, that context is there. And I think what I like about the film is it's more implicit in the relationships than explicit. It's not something that we talk about sort of at the forefront, but it's implicit in the way that the men interact with each other, and in the way that they're perceived as well. So, I'm very interested and fascinated in the politics and the history of this city and this part of the world. And but I think there's a sort of a healthy distance from it, because I suppose also it's important to tell stories from the north that aren't defined by that, or where that is not the only talking point, because I think people are probably tired of that. There's obviously the place for those stories, but if it becomes solely about the politics, I tend to think you can lose people. Some stories require that, but this one felt right to foreground the victims of this.
Give the gang what they want and away they go.
We call, you answer. Feel, she dies.
Get your arse down there.
What if you can't get them what they want?
Do you not have faith in your husband, Mrs. Murray?
Not always.
I hear you.
Independent filmmaking is incredibly difficult to put together, and you work and work and work and work, and you get your script together, and then suddenly you go out looking for cast. And we just got really lucky that, all the stars aligned for this one. So, yeah, they were amazing.
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to do the movie, because I was working with Aina. I was a big fan of his. I knew that we were going to be working together. I wanted to work with somebody who was collaborative and somebody I could trust, because we were going to be, most of our scenes is just together, really.
Eddie Marsan, he's just an epic actor, and he's a total pro. Every day, every scene, nothing drops. His rigor is incredible. He's so well prepared. He's so spontaneous. He gives such a complex performance, and he's a great sparring partner. You want actors who listen or in the moment and surprise you, and I got so much of that from him.
Well, I would take this Northern Ireland crew, I would take them with me anywhere. They're great fun. They really work hard. They're really collaborative and cooperative, and they take at me all day long, which I love.
What did you say? Did you tell him?
Go, go, go!
What are you doing?
Report of activity at the Northern Bank.
You want more cash? Are you listening to me?
I'm gonna need to see you inside the bag.
So that's our chat with some of the cast and crew of No Ordinary Heist. That is out in cinemas from the 27th of March. And we're going to move on. So we've been talking about films that we can see in the cinema. Let's move on and wrap up this week's show with something we can watch at home.
Most people would know you as a content creator. What would you say is the message?
I coach boys how to be boys, how to make money, how to be outside the system, how to not have a boss telling you what to do. I teach guys to be proper guys, not these little soy boys, gimps that walk around in the modern day.
Would you see me that way?
I I'm not sure. I'd have to see what your skills are.
Did you look at my arms?
Well, I just sort of checked your stature out.
Did you?
Yeah.
Go on.
The stature's not saying too much.
So that's a look at Louis Theroux, Inside the Manosphere, out on Netflix now. An interesting but yet very, very depressing documentary. I'm a huge fan of Louis Theroux, but this is kind of looking at kind of toxic masculinity, the rise of these kind of very toxic social media platformers that are influencing a lot of people. And Jess, you made a really good point. You know, we here in Northern Ireland, we do have an issue about violence against women and young girls. But here's a documentary where we have Louis Theroux, whose style people will know as kind of someone who you could not dislike. You could not dislike, who finds a way of getting in and in his unique style gets these people to open up, whether it's for good or not. I mean, I find this a very depressing watch. And to be honest, it took me 3 goes. And had we not decided to talk about it on the TV show, I probably would not have finished it. But that is just me. But I think it's a worthy watch. I think if you've seen the likes of Adolescence on Netflix, you know, it's a I don't want to say nice companion piece, but it works in that sense. In the world of Andrew Tate, people that I find, I'm not a perfect man, Jess. I'm far from it, but I find myself having serious issues with some of what is on screen here. So, Jess, I will come to you. Your thoughts on Louis Theroux, Inside the Manosphere?
Wow. Like you, I struggled to get through the documentary, more so that my poor husband had to pause it about every 15 minutes to let me get the rage out. Just let me have my piece, say how they're wrong, and carry on. But kind of taking a step back emotionally and watching the documentary, Louis, in my eyes, can do no wrong. He's a fantastic documentarian. He has that really beautiful charm and way with working these people of just giving enough rope and let them hang themselves. And he handles that incredibly well throughout this. These are people who are, very, controversial. They're very confrontational. They want to get that rise out of you. And
they want your money, more importantly, as well.
Exactly. Now, I will say I was a little bit disappointed in the documentary overall, as I felt it kind of looked at a very high-level overview of the problem of the manosphere. It didn't really go in too much depth about really the kind of rise of that particular sort of thinking and group and how that's kind of spread across the internet. And it goes back a lot farther than people really realise. Its roots can be found way back into the 80s with the beginning of a lot of the kind of manly self-help. Sort of then when we had that kind of cultural shift of women sort of becoming more independent, the family unit becoming much less of that kind of nuclear family at home. It goes really quite deep, and it's not really touched on. It doesn't even really touch on the more kind of popular origins of the manosphere. It mentions Andrew Tate, but doesn't really go into much, which part of me is glad of, because there's already too much screen time to that man, in my opinion, in general. But I feel like it's almost a documentary for our times of people who are already informed. Like you said, we have shows like Adolescence. We do spend an awful lot of our time online, where obviously this is discussed in a lot of depth. So it's almost, I think, more of just sort of highlighting to people what they already know, rather than maybe what a more true kind of documentary of going into that kind of more expose, origins and detailed kind of stuff. And that would be my only real gripe.
It's shining a light, but I think there's even people who are, we're aware of it. Or, yeah, we know what we're talking about. But I think it just kind of shines that. Louis Theroux, I think, brings that slightly brighter torch, if this analogy works. But I think it also becomes, and I've discussed this, and I've mentioned this before for previous films, it's a launch pad for discussions. And I think it's a more accessible way for some people to approach that subject matter and create a platform for maybe parents to talk with children about particularly male role models. But it's maybe easier to sit down and watch that than it is to, because this is what, an hour and a half to sit down and watch Adolescence, or there are other documentaries that discuss this subject matter. Joe, I've talked quite a bit there. I went off on a little mini Jim McLean rant. We are, wrapping up the show, but your thoughts on this? Did you find this a depressing watch?
Well, I'm a big fan of Louis Theroux, and he's interviewed a lot of controversial characters and groups over the years, like the KKK, Westboro Baptist Church. These fellas are up there for me in terms of how deplorable they are and the horrifying impact they're having on young men throughout the world. Like going into the documentary, like when they were introducing each other, I was like, I have no idea. Like I sent the meme into the the BANTERFLIX group chat of Martin Scorsese going, who are these people? It was like, what is going on? And then, like yourselves, the second they started opening their mouths, I was just confused and angry at the same time. I was like, what are you talking about? What is this nonsense? And then as it goes on, Louis being the great documentarian he is, like Jess alluded to, he just stands back and lets them, hang themselves with their nonsense. But the thing about it is, the most horrifying aspect is when he interviews one of them in New York. I can't remember his name. It's not worth remembering. And a bunch of teenage boys runs up to him and is like, oh, I want a selfie with you. And it's like, that's horrendous, that they idolise and they look up to someone who...
And are aware of him.
Yeah. Then it got me thinking about, how easy it is for them to get access to their materials and how, like I told you an example, I watched football highlights one day and then the next thing I knew, all the suggested stuff was the likes of these people or people of similar type. And I was like, I have no interest in this. Why is it tying me to this? And then the algorithm, you check with the algorithm and it says, oh, it's because you've watched football. And I was like, that's not an equivalency, it's nonsensical, but that's a thing that sort of goes back to what you were saying, Jess, about, how I wish the documentary went into, well, how are these platforms not properly looking at this stuff and, regulating it a lot more. I think that's something that could have been improved upon the documentary. But again, going back to what you're saying, I think it's the overall exposure of it in general is what's going to be a good platform for, opening discussions about it and hopefully shutting all these voices down because it's just horrendous.
It is a depressing watch, but there is still the Louis Theroux, there's enough of the Louis Theroux charm that we've come to expect, in some case love, that will be there. So it is worthwhile watching, and I think we're all in agreement here. But yeah, it is a tough, depressing watch at times about some of the kind of negative masculine figures that are out there. We need more Ryan Gosling in our world. That's what we need. That's what I will leave this week's show on that note. So that's us pretty much out of time. So all that's left for me to say now is thank you very much, Jess.
Thank you.
Good to have you on the show again. Thank you very much, Joe.
Thanks, Jim.
I promise you next time we will get you to Hollywood with 2 L's. And of course, thanks very much for watching at home. We'll be back next week with another episode. But for now, until then, goodbye.